What is the difference between an immediate relative and a family preference category in U.S. immigration law? That's what we're talking about on today's episode of Sumner School Family Immigration Basics. My name is Emily Sumner with Sumner Immigration Law, and let's get into it. An immediate relative is the spouse of a U.S. citizen, the minor child of a U.S. citizen, that means under 21, or the parent of a U.S. citizen, as long as that U.S. citizen is at least 21 years old. We'll get into the details of what a family preference category is in just a minute, what those categories are. But first, let's talk about the difference between the two, why this difference matters. In general, in US immigration, there's a limit on the number of green cards available every year. So there's a limit for family-based and a limit for employment-based. We talked about that annual limit on the number of green cards available every year for employment-based in our employment-based series. So go back and check that out if you're interested in that. Within employment-based, rather within family-based, the family-based classification, there is a limit on the number of green cards available. However, immediate relatives of US citizens, so that's the category we just talked about, do not fall into that limitation. So in other words, if you are an immediate relative of a US citizen, you don't have to worry about that annual numerical limitation. You do have to wait in the sense that you have to wait for USCIS, the immigration agency, to process your paperwork. If the Department of State is involved, you have to wait for the Department of State or National Visa Center to process your paperwork, but you don't need to wait for a green card to become available because you're not subject to that annual numerical limitation. So let's talk about the family preference categories now. One thing to keep in mind is that just because somebody is your family member does not mean that you can necessarily sponsor them, even if you are a US citizen or permanent resident. So for example, it's not possible to directly sponsor your cousin or your grandmother. They're very specific categories that depend on your immigration status, you as the petitioner, the person sponsoring the foreign national, and what your family relationship is. So let's talk about the family preference categories. The first is F1, and I am going to reference my notes to make sure I'm telling you all the right thing. First one is F1, which is unmarried sons and daughters of US citizens who are at least 21 years old or older. F2A, so the F2 category is broken down into two categories here. F2A is spouses and unmarried children of green card holders. So when I say unmarried children, I mean under the age of 21. F2B is unmarried sons and daughters of green card holders. Those sons and daughters are age 21 or older. F3 is married sons and daughters of US citizens. F4 is brothers and sisters of US citizens, as long as that US citizen is at least 21 years old. So that's a lot of information. It's available online. Know that there are specific categories and it's not possible to sponsor every family member. It really is limited to depends on your status, but it really depends, it's limited to siblings and children and spouses. So, like I said, unlike immediate relatives, these family preference categories, the ones that we just talked about, F1, F2A, F2B, F3, F4, they're subject to an annual numerical limitation. That means that in addition to having to wait for the petition to be processed by USCIS and then for it to be processed by Department of State, you probably will also have to wait for the visa or the green card. I'm using those words interchangeably here. You have to wait for that to become available. That wait depends on a number of factors, and we'll have a separate video about it, but it depends on things like your country of birth, the foreign national that's being sponsored, their country of birth. It depends on the category, the preference category, and it depends on the priority date. All of this is contained within a document called the Visa Bulletin that's published once a month by the Department of State. And like I said, we'll have a separate video on it because that's really important. But know that if your family member that you'd like to sponsor falls into a preference category, you're almost certainly going to have to wait for a green card to become available for them. So that's why planning ahead is so incredibly important, to plan ahead, to have realistic expectations, and to have a clear strategy in place. If you are not sure which category your family member falls into, or if you're even able to sponsor your family member, please contact us, give us a call to set a consultation. The first step is to have a consultation. You can call us, you can email us, or you can schedule directly online. You can book directly online without having to talk to us first. So if you're interested in doing that, you can visit our website, sumnerimmigration.com. You can email us at info@sumnerimmigration.com or call us at 804-396-3412 to set up that first consultation. During that consultation, we will talk about your specific situation and the options that are available for you and come up with a strategic plan for you moving forward. So you have clear expectations, a clear plan, clear path going forward. One last thing to keep in mind is if you are interested in sponsoring a family member who does not fall into one of these classifications, there may be alternative ways for that person still to come to the United States. So for example, perhaps they could come through an employment-based process, or even within family-based, it may be possible, but it may be that a different family member is able to or has to sponsor them. So keep the faith alive, keep the hope alive. Thank you for watching. If you have found this information helpful, I hope that you will subscribe to our channel and share this video with a friend or colleague. Otherwise, my name is Emily Sumner with Sumner Immigration Law, serving clients all over the world and all over the United States with employment-based and family-based immigration matters. Until next time.